Hello everyone and welcome to the weird, scary and horrible parts of humanity. Firstly, apologies for any croakiness in my voice because I have the flu. It's March, it's Europe, what can I say? Today we are looking at the arrest and imprisonment of Australian drug user Michelle Leslie, who was arrested in 2005 in Bali, Indonesia, for possessing 2 ecstasy tablets which were for personal use. Now I should point out that I'm old enough to remember the conviction and trial and imprisonment of Leslie and anger that many Australians felt in the double standard of what Leslie was subjected to compared to other Australians in jail overseas at the time, even though her crime, and that word can itself be used lightly, was not in the same league as other Australians imprisoned overseas. However, at the time there was the feeling that Leslie was taking the country and indeed Indonesia for a bit of a ride, as well as making something of a mockery of the Islamic faith, and you have to ask yourself if, nearly 20 years later, she could get away with what she did in 2024. Simultaneously, there are disputes surrounding her actual culpability. Indeed, Leslie to this day claims that she was a victim of Indonesian and Balinese police corruption, with the drugs planted on her, while other sources claim that she was indeed, per her own confession, a drug user. By a long mile, Australians are the largest group of tourists to Bali, with 1,201,652 Australians visiting Bali in 2023, followed by India, which is way down, at 394,428 Indians visiting Bali in 2023. This number is massive for Australia, with Australia's population being 26.6 million as of 2023, meaning that 4.5% of Australians visited Bali in just 1 year. Indeed, as of a recording of this video, 5 airlines fly direct from 8 Australian cities to Bali, with Canberra, the country's capital, becoming the 9th city in June 2024 when Batik Air starts direct flights from Canberra to Bali. Now, the clientele, shall we say, of Aussie tourists to Bali ranges across the gauntlet of Australian society, from bogans, with the term Bali bogans coming to pass in the Australian and Indonesian media in 2023, to people visiting resorts which cost thousands of dollars a night. The mid-2000s was a pretty low point for Australian tourists in Bali. On the 8th of October 2004, Chappelle Corby visited Bali, Indonesia, and was arrested with 4.2 kilograms of weed inside a vacuum-sealed bag in her unlocked bodyboard bag in Ngurah Rai International Airport. Channel 9 journalist Mike Munro would state that the case of Corby divided Australia the most of any trial since the Lindy Chamberlain trial, who was accused of killing her 9-week-old daughter Azaria on the 17th of August 1980 while camping in Uluru in the Northern Territory, and convicted on the 29th of October 1982, receiving a life sentence, before it was found that a dingo had in fact killed her baby, and she was released on the 7th of February 1986. The Corby case both divided and fixated Australia, with Corby convicted of drug smuggling on the 27th of May 2005 and sentenced to 20 years by the Denpasar District Court at a fine of 1 million Indonesian rupiah, despite potentially facing a death sentence. She was eventually released on parole on the 10th of February 2014 and deported on the 27th of May 2017 to her native Australia. Moreover, on the 17th of April 2005, 9 Australians were arrested for attempting to smuggle a combined 8.3 kilograms of heroin out of Indonesia to Australia. 2, Andrew Chan and Mayuran Sukumaran, were executed on the 29th of April 2015. 1, Tan Tock Van Nguyen died of stomach cancer on the 5th of June 2018. 1, Renee Lawrence has been released, and the remaining 5 remain in various Indonesian jails. We did videos on each of these 9 individuals, so please don't forget to check all of those videos out. Amidst all of this, madness, was an Australian Filipina model arrested for drug possession in Bali, Indonesia, who was arrested for drug possession on the 21st of August 2005. However, if there was one sentence that best epitomises this case, we have to go back exactly 20 years before Leslie's arrest to Australian British citizen Kevin John Barlow, who was eventually executed on the 7th of July 1986 for attempting to smuggle 141.9 grams of low-grade heroin from Penang, Malaysia to Perth, Western Australia. In an August 1985 interview, a chain-smoking Barlow, who at the time was under an exclusive agreement with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the ABC, for interviews would tell the network's then Southeast Asian correspondent Paul Lockyer, "But there's too much corruption in this country. There's a saying here, no money, no talk. You've got money, anything's possible. You got no money, bad luck. Suffer." And even though Barlow said that about Malaysia, it freaking epitomises Leslie's case, arrest and brief time in an Indonesian jail perfectly. Michelle Leslie's father, Albert, was a native of Woolloomooloo in Sydney, New South Wales in Australia. He was a truly gifted basketball player. In 1960 he began playing for the under-16 New South Wales state team, representing the state until 1964 in the senior men's state team, before moving to Adelaide to become part of the South Australian men's team in 1965. However, he would return to the senior men's state team in New South Wales for 1 year in 1969. It was in South Australia that he reached the zenith of his basketball career, with the team taking the premiership the year that Leslie joined the team in 1965. In 1966 he joined the South Australian senior men's state team, with the team being state champions in that year before being runners-up in 1967 and 1968. He also played for the United Church men's team from 1966, winning the Kays Trophy in 1966, and Albert Leslie himself winning the Woolacott Medal in 1967. He also represented the Sydney YMCA team from 1969 to 1972. But it wasn't just on the local and state competition stage that Albert Leslie found success. He also saw it on the national stage. In 1968 he represented the Australian Olympic team at a pre-Olympic tournament held in Monterrey, Mexico, one of 12 Australian players rostered. This was in the lead up to the 1968 Summer Olympics to be held in Mexico City, Mexico. In 1970 he went on to play in the 1970 World Championship for men in what was then Yugoslavia in Ljubljana, today the capital of Slovenia. However, his international career wasn't all that successful. Australia failed to qualify for the 1968 Olympics, and in his entire international career he only scored 13 points. But that wasn't the only time that he would play internationally. In 1973 he returned to the South Australia men's state team, and they played the Philippines national team as part of a Philippines tour. While there he would meet a young Filipino woman named Violeta, one of 12 children and a nurse. Ironically, all of Violetta's siblings were named after a flower. Both would marry, and Violeta would relocate to Adelaide, South Australia. Albert Leslie would continue playing basketball with the Forestville Eagles men's team, while Violeta would continue working as a nurse. They only had one child, Michelle, born on the 13th of April 1981. Albert would then go into basketball coaching, becoming the lead coach of the South Australia under-20 men's team, coaching them to championships in 1986 and 1987, before leaving the team in 1989. He then became the head coach of the Adelaide Buffaloes. Meanwhile, young Michelle was a bit of a tomboy and a bit of a rebel. She attended the Sacred Heart College, an independent Catholic secondary school located in Somerton Park, South Australia. She would identify as a Christian. However, it is not known which sector of Christianity she identified as, but was most likely a Catholic, based on her mother being a Filipina. This included at her arrest, but this conveniently changed 4 days after her arrest on the 25th of August 2005, according to the Herald Sun. For her 15th birthday in 1996, Michelle Leslie was given a course at a modelling school by her father. She enjoyed it so much that she undertook a second course and then left Sacred Heart College prior to graduating with the aim of becoming a full-time model. The teenage Leslie would sign with Chick Management and became one of South Australia's most successful models, working for retailers David Jones, Harris Scarfe and Myer, as well as in continuity promotions for Channel 7, although these would only air in South Australia. Ironically, it was at the same time that her father's coaching career continued to soar, including becoming an assistant coach of the Adelaide 36ers, as well as participating in the Sydney 2000 Olympics torch relay, as the Olympic torch made its way to Sydney for the 2000 Summer Olympic Games. At the time of his daughter's arrest, however, he was an accountant. In the same year, Michelle Leslie participated in the Channel 10 TV show Search for a Supermodel and was one of 20 finalists. Search for a Supermodel was broadcast by Channel 10 in Australia from 2000 to 2002 and would air on TV3 in New Zealand. The show broadcast for 3 series, with the 3rd season including female and male contestants. In 2000, Leslie was the first runner-up in the Miss World pageant, which was held in Darwin in the Northern Territory. She lost to Renee Henderson, who herself was unplaced in the Miss World pageant. In 2002, this was replaced by Miss World Australia. It was from here that Leslie's modelling career would skyrocket, and she started to work in Asia under the name Michelle Lee, as well as in New York and the United States of America, where her modelling career would reach its zenith. In 2003, Leslie would temporarily move to New York. In 2003, she became the face of Crystal Lingerie and became involved in a 2004 advertising campaign for Ants Pants underwear. In 2003, she started a relationship with Scott Sutton, who at the time lived in a penthouse in one of Sydney's most prestigious suburbs, Darling Point, on Thornton Street. His father, Neil Sutton, owned a bunch of Holden car dealers, and Scott was set to inherit $200 million. So unlike Garth Brooks, Leslie had friends in high places. In August 2005, Leslie flew alone to Bali, Indonesia from Singapore, where she had been working as a model prior to returning to her native Australia. On the 21st of August 2005, she was travelling in a vehicle to an open-air dance party at Garuda Winsu Kencana Cultural Park, coming from another party. Along with her were 2 unidentified men, one of whom was described by Balinese newspapers as a strong influence in the legal and justice system, as well as the son of the coordinating minister for the economy, Aburizal Bakriye, Anindra Bakriye, who was minister from 2004 until 2005 before becoming the coordinating minister for people's welfare from 2005 until 2009, as well as Leslie's friend Siti Namira Azman, who worked in Singapore. Azman was of Malay descent, a citizen of Singapore, and worked for Chic Management. Indonesian police stopped them for what was described as a routine traffic stop. Inside Leslie's Gucci purse, 2 ecstasy tablets were found in tissue paper. If found guilty, she would face up to 15 years in jail for possession of drugs. By contrast, unless the intention is to traffic for drugs, if found in possession of ecstasy tablets in New South Wales, if found guilty, you can get a fine of up to $5,000 or other penalties, including community service work, or a term in prison of up to 2 years. In South Australia, the maximum penalty under the Controlled Substances Act 1984 for possession or consumption of ecstasy for personal use carries a maximum penalty of $2,000 or imprisonment of 2 years or both. Leslie was subsequently arrested by Balinese police for drug possession. In an early interview, Azman would state to the Sydney Morning Herald that Leslie planned to give the ecstasy to 2 other friends, but the friends at the last minute decided not to go to the party. Azman would state, "I wasn't worried at all when the police searched. I was really worried when they all started going for her," referring to Leslie. However, Leslie would note to 60 Minutes on Channel 9 that she was set up as a non-Indonesian and a model perceived to have money. Leslie also stated that if she had known about the ecstasy tablets, given the time that Indonesian police took to search and make it to her, she would have hidden it in her knickers or in her bra. However, at the party beforehand at a villa, it was estimated that 20% of attendees were taking ecstasy or cocaine. And 2 witnesses spoke to the Sydney Morning Herald who said that Leslie took ecstasy prior to leaving for the dance party. Leslie alleged that upon her arrest, Indonesian police demanded a bribe of $25,000 US, but they would be willing to negotiate in euros for her release. However, she stated on principle that she refused to pay the bribe as she had been set up. But following the interview with 60 Minutes, the Sydney Morning Herald openly contradicted what Leslie had told Channel 9. In an interview between Michelle Leslie's friend and confidant Nora Cullen and the then Jakarta correspondent for the Sydney Morning Herald Mark Fobbs, in the days after Leslie's arrest, Sutton had made a series of cash transfers to the Indonesian dealer who had supplied the ecstasy tablets to Leslie. and her friends in an attempt to bribe their way out of trouble, with 5 wire transfers of $5,000 US from Sutton to Bali, the day after the arrest of Leslie, with the recipient the dealer, who confirmed to the Sydney Morning Herald that he had indeed received the money. Cullen noted in the interview that Leslie had planned to buy her way out of trouble, despite in the 60 Minutes interview noting that she had initially refused to pay any money to Indonesian police as a bribe. It is worth pointing out that at the time the Sydney Morning Herald was owned by the Fairfax media outlet and was not owned by Channel 9, thereby it was living up more so to its tagline, independent, always, and was able to criticise Channel 9, and also rather uniquely was not in the business of outing Australian celebrities, as Andrew Hornery did to Rebel Wilson in 2022, and thereby it was more open to contradicting what Leslie had stated on 60 Minutes. Moreover, Leslie's PR representative Sean Mulcahy sent $25,000 US as a bribe to Indonesian police, but this never made it in time. The police reports would also state that Leslie had been taking ecstasy for a year and could not enjoy parties without taking ecstasy. However, this was later refuted by Leslie. Urine tests found no evidence that she had used drugs, while blood tests found traces of amphetamines, specifically ecstasy. In the paperwork of her urine tests, Leslie would state that she was a Christian, writing Christian in the paperwork, Christian in Bahasa Indonesian. The son of Bakri was released, as were the 2 other individuals in the car with Leslie. At least according to Leslie's lawyers, they were able to bribe their way out of trouble, but not Leslie, who was told to pay the $25,000 bribe if she was to be released. According to Leslie, in an interview with 60 Minutes, someone visited her in prison threatening her if she told on Bakri's son, and noted that the individual had to have high connections in order to get into the prison cell in the police station as a member of the public. However, Indonesian police would always deny that this ever happened. And so Leslie was held in a police cell in police custody, and according to her was ridiculed by guards and forced to pay bribes to keep her mattress, with 13 other women in the cell with her. She would later allege that the cell was cockroach infested, and that she only had a bucket of water to wash, and that a woman in her cell was regularly taken out and forced to have sex with male police officers. It was most likely due to the other 10 Australians being currently held in Kerbakana prison in Indonesia and potentially facing the death sentence that Australian media ran with Leslie's story for all it's worth and milked it for all it's worth, combined with the fact that another Australian, Van Tuong Nguyen, was facing the gallows for drug smuggling in Singapore and was subsequently executed on the 2nd of December 2005. By the way, we did an earlier video on the plight and execution of Van Tuong Nguyen, so don't forget to check that video out. On the 21st of August 2005, Channel 7 managed to interview Leslie's mother, Violetta, through the screen door of their Adelaide home. Violetta noted the family's bewilderment and confusion at Leslie's arrest for drug possession. On the 23rd of August 2005, the then Prime Minister of Australia, John Howard, warned Australians not to take drugs overseas and warned users that the Australian government would not bail them out if they were arrested. However, despite facing a maximum of 15 years in prison, Leslie's trial would make a mockery of the Indonesian and Balinese legal system, and showed that, to quote Barlow, with money, anything is possible. And having a boyfriend with a $200 million inheritance was also going to be a massive help. Basically, money from Sutton, Leslie's father, and various other stakeholders were exchanged amongst various parties in Indonesia throughout her ordeal in Indonesia, with the bill for the Leslie family reaching $300,000, while the amount that Sutton spent remains a mystery to this day. Indeed, Neil Sutton would tell the Sydney Morning Herald, "Scott's the one who's done most things. I was just supporting my son where I could, emotionally, and being a father." Albert Leslie would note that they mortgaged the family home in an attempt to save their daughter from an extended prison sentence. Indeed, Jeff Chambers Sr. told Radio National in an interview in 2005 that he had to mortgage the family home in Perth, Western Australia, in an attempt to save his son, Brian Jeffrey Chambers, from the gallows in 1986, but this wasn't successful, with Chambers executed on the 7th of July 1986. Neil Sutton sent $80,000 to what the Sydney Morning Herald would describe as a senior manager to be distributed within Bali, and $100,000 went to well-connected lawyers in Bali. Furthermore, with the aforementioned drug test, which showed drugs in her blood, it was noted by the Sydney Morning Herald that an estimated $27,000 was paid to the police laboratory to try and change the results, but the head of the laboratory said that it was not possible to change the results. However, Leslie insisted that she was not a drug user, and in an interview with 60 Minutes said that the blood test was deliberately set up with the Indonesian police and her lawyers. More on that in a bit. Furthermore, an additional $27,000 was paid to the Bali chief officer I Made Mangku Pastika in an attempt to bribe him. Indeed, the Sydney Morning Herald estimates that the amount paid in an attempt to secure Leslie's freedom was 600,000 Australian dollars, and to put that into perspective, the Australian Bureau of Statistics noted that in November 2005, the average salary across the private and public sector in Australia was $53,534. Or as then host of A Current Affair Ray Martin would state, in Bali, money talks. But how was this money gained? Well, Leslie would become a household name across Australia and a feature story on current affair and news shows throughout much of late 2005, including being paid $10,000 for an interview with Channel 7 News from her police cell, and $70,000 for an interview with New Idea magazine. Indeed, Mackay would negotiate media deals and would tell Cullen, "We are going to make a lot of money out of this." But the majority of the money would come from Sutton and his father's fortune. Indeed, the Suttons were so confident that Leslie would be released that they bought a ticket home for her, but that didn't come to pass for some time. But what strategy would Leslie's lawyers use to get her off the hook? Well, it was a dual strategy, and one which aroused a hell of a lot of controversy at the time and probably couldn't be done nowadays. Firstly, Leslie was to be a Muslim. Well, according to her spokesman, she had been a Muslim for 18 months before her arrest, having lived with a Muslim family for 3 years. But Asman said that she was unaware of this at the time of Leslie's arrest. Indeed, Leslie was seen drinking alcohol and taking drugs at the party prior to her arrest, which would contradict the Islamic faith. Leslie would always scoff at the idea that she wasn't a Muslim, despite the Herald Sun reporting that she had 4 days to find Allah, and in her police paperwork she would cross out Christian and replace it with Islam. Initially wearing a hijab throughout most of her trial, she once rocked up to court wearing a burqa. According to Professor Lindsay, the director of the Asian Law Centre at the University of Melbourne, wearing Muslim clothing would make no sense as a defence, nor would fabricating a Muslim, and it wouldn't make any difference to Leslie's case based on the number of Muslims in Indonesian jails. While Indonesia is a highly Muslim-populated country, with 87% of the country identifying as Muslim, Bali is an anomaly amidst the 6,000 inhabited islands of Indonesia, with Bali the only Hindu-majority province in Indonesia, and 86.9% of the Balinese population Hindu. But why did Leslie suddenly become a Muslim and become so prolific in visually showing her faith? Well, she said that prison guards tried to rape her and harass her, and journalists would kick her on her way to court. But when she wore the burqa, guards would not try to harass her, and journalists would stay away. This was met with fierce criticism from the Muslim population in Australia, with her lawyers forced to make a public apology in late August 2005, and by November 2005, Amir Ali, the president of the Australian Federation of Islamic Councils, would state that Leslie modelling in lingerie or underwear would not be allowed in the Islamic faith, and hence she would either have to change her ways or give up the faith. In June 2006, Leslie was asked if she was a Muslim on 60 Minutes and would state, "I'm not a practicing Muslim," and Cullen would tell journalists that she fabricated being a Muslim to hide herself from journalists. But Asman would come to her defence, stating, "The Muslim extremist people should give her a break. She's not trying to kill anyone." The second strategy was to lie and say that Leslie was a drug addict and addicted to prescription medication, specifically Ritalin, which would calm anxiety attacks. Ritalin is a central nervous stimulant which affects chemicals in the brain and nerves that contribute to hyperactivity and impulsivity, commonly used in ADD, attention deficit disorder, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This was backed up by a Sydney doctor's report. Furthermore, while Leslie denied having taken ecstasy in court and shook her head vigorously when asked if she was a drug addict during a court hearing in October 2005, Leslie alleged that she was told by her lawyers to sign paperwork noting that she was a drug addict, noting to 60 Minutes that her blood samples were tampered with to include drugs in order to play the system, thereby her original urine tests had come up negative, while her blood tests showed amphetamines, specifically ecstasy. However, Channel 7 reported that on the 26th of August 2005, Leslie had been taking ecstasy since 2004 and she couldn't party without the drug. On the 14th of October 2005, Leslie was sent to the notorious Kerobokan prison in Bali, where she would join fellow Australians, the Bali 9 and Chappelle Corbier. But what did all of this mean? Well, under Indonesian law, if someone is a user rather than possessing drugs, the sentencing will be 3 months as a maximum, rather than a maximum sentence of 15 years. On the 18th of November 2005, she was taken from Kerobokan prison to Denpasar District Court. According to ABC News, she looked relaxed and composed, almost as if she knew what was going to happen. The judges at her trial were Chief Judge I Made Sudia, I Gusti Nugura Astatawa and Eddie Paulian Sierragara. There she was sentenced to 3 months in prison, but this took into account time served, conveniently 3 months, and she was ordered to pay court costs totaling 1,000 Indonesian rupiah or 14 Australian cents. Presiding Judge I Madea Suida would tell the court the defendant Michelle Leslie is proven legally and convincingly guilty of carrying out the crime of receiving psychoactive drugs from sources other than a pharmacy or hospital. Her defense team said that they had accepted the verdict and judges declared the case closed. Indeed, despite initially requesting 15 years in jail, the prosecutors also requested a 3-month sentence because it was the first time that Leslie had been charged. She was polite and had expressed regret. In Bahasa Indonesian, Leslie said, "Thank you, Mr. Judge," and shook hands with the judges at the conclusion of the trial. Taken back to Kerobokan jail, it was expected that Leslie would be released shortly, with Mulcahy saying that she looked forward to returning home to clear her name. Her Australian lawyer Ross Hill said that she should never have been arrested. On the 28th of November 2005, the Judicial Commission of Indonesia announced that it would be investigating judges Sudia Astatawa and Siragara with the belief that what Leslie was given was too lenient a sentence. The Judicial Commission of Indonesia was set up in Indonesia as a consequence of the Third Amendment of the Constitution of Indonesia and ratified by the Indonesian People's Consultative Assembly on the 9th of November 2001 with the aim of monitoring the performance of judges and to advise the Indonesian House of Representatives on judicial appointments and review community complaints about the behaviour and fairness of presiding judges. However, the commission would only come to pass on the 2nd of July 2005. However, odds were pretty good for the judges, with 280 cases having been investigated by the Commission up until the 28th of November 2005, and only one corruption verdict was returned. Leslie's lawyers scoffed at this idea and said that it was not the judges but the police who were corrupt, and would tell the Age newspaper on the 1st of January 2006 that it was the police, not the judges, who should be investigated. The investigation panel held a hearing into the 3 judges to see if bribes had been paid for a lighter sentence, and on the 7th of January 2006 it was found that indeed there was no evidence that a bribe had been paid. The day after the court hearing on the 18th of November 2005, Leslie was released from Kerobokan prison to a flurry of media attention and taken to Bali's Ngurah Rai International Airport. On the 19th of November 2005, she was deported from Indonesia, with Mulcahy saying that her defence team was extremely disappointed that Leslie was deported. The then Prime Minister of Australia, John Howard, would state regarding young Australians in Asia, "I would encourage them not to take drugs, full stop, without compromise. Anybody who thinks they can get away with it is just taking leave of their senses. You cannot expect to violate the laws of other countries and then get some kind of special treatment because you're Australian. It doesn't work that way." Leslie would also express her love for Sutton, who had not visited her while she was in prison at her request, describing him as "the man I adore, idealise and love," with Sutton describing Leslie as a beautiful soul and "she is the absolute love of my life." Our future together is extremely bright. But here is where yet more controversy would come to pass regarding Leslie's alleged Islamic faith. Flying in business class aboard Singapore Airlines to Singapore, Leslie was scantily dressed in tight-fitting clothes and reading Vogue magazine, with people asking why she wasn't wearing the burqa or hijab as a Muslim. While in Singapore, the Sydney Morning Herald reported that she met with friends and apologised to Azman for involving her in the debacle, while Channel 9 reported that she took care of unfinished business. Arriving in Singapore, she would tell the media, "I'm so exhausted. I'm really excited to be going home, and I'm just really relieved to be out of Indonesia, and I'm really thankful to all the people who have supported me and sent me emails and letters and phone calls during my time in Bali." On the 21st of November 2005, she flew aboard Singapore Airlines into Sydney, Australia, arriving early in the morning on the 22nd of November 2005 with a packed media scrum awaiting her arrival. She told the media, "I'm really tired and exhausted. The events of the past 3 months have really turned my life upside down. I'm glad to be home to see my family, Scott, and my friends. I'd like to thank everybody who stood by me and supported me while I've been away." While one journalist would shout, "Are you a Muslim?" Leslie ignored the question and proceeded to a black sedan with 6 sedans, all of the same colour and same model, all driving away in order to deceive journalists as to which car Leslie was actually in. Channel 10 News would later capture Leslie on a water taxi heading along Sydney Harbour for Darling Point, where Scott Sutton lived in a penthouse on Thornton Street. On the 26th of November 2005, Michelle Leslie gave a teary press conference to the media at the Sydney Sheraton on the Park, now the Sheraton Grand Hyde Park, a 5-star hotel in the CBD. She only read a prepared statement and did not take any questions from the media. She would note that her family had spent their life savings securing her release and simultaneously had had to mortgage the family home, stating, "As you can imagine, I feel terrible about this, and I want to be able to work and repay them the money that I owe them. I am, however, extremely fortunate. I'm surrounded by friends and family who love me and respect me, and I'm home." Leslie would state, "I can't begin to describe how frightened I was and how confusing it was to find myself in that situation. I always expected that if I got free, I would always be able to tell the Australian public what happened. But now that I'm back here, I still don't believe it's safe for me to do so because there's still a number of other young Australians in Indonesian jails, and I simply won't take the risk of making it worse for them than it already is." She also expressed her anger at Prime Minister John Howard, stating, "What really shocked me is the amount of anger that has been levelled at me, especially from the Prime Minister." However, Prime Minister John Howard would stand by his comments. Indeed, public sympathy towards Leslie was pretty low. It was widely accepted that she had bought her way out of prison vis-a-vis Sutton, and at the time many saw, despite the difference between possession and trafficking of drugs, a double standard in how the Bali Nine, Chappelle Corby, Van Tuong Nguyen and Michelle Leslie were being treated. ABC News retroactively looked at her case and Corby's case 10 years later in 2015 during the execution of Sukumaran and Chan, and would state, "In August there came Leslie, arrested on a crime that in Australia might have earned her a caution, but whose high-end looks, moneyed connections and decision to frock up in Muslim garb as a judicious ploy for judicial sympathy earned the Sydney model 1 million unwanted close-ups, an almost perverse lack of sympathy at home, but a swift release that saw her back with family for Christmas, even as senior members of the government joined the pile-on against her freedom strategy." Leslie also pertained during the press conference that she was a Muslim, stating, "As for the hurtful allegations that I pretended to be a Muslim, let me say first of all, it was never my intention to offend anyone in the Muslim community. I am Muslim, and I do understand the significance of wearing the burqa. I should have thought more carefully about wearing it in that situation, and I apologise for any offence I have caused. It was an extreme situation." She would describe the whole ordeal as extremely life-changing and a terrible experience. One day earlier, on the 25th of November 2005, she faxed her resignation to Chick Management and signed with Max Markson. On the 27th of November 2005, she and Sutton got a dog that they named Vegas. In April 2006, Leslie travelled to Cambodia to help raise money for the charity Kroyasa TH Mier, a Cambodian charity designed to help disadvantaged children in Cambodia, which has existed since 1991. While there, she met with the King of Cambodia, Norodom Sihamoni. In the same month, she modelled swimwear for designer Michael Azzolini during the 2006 Australian Fashion Week, expressing her glee and joy at being back and a beaming, never-ending smile as she walked down the catwalk. But she struggled to get work as a model following her Bali conviction, and she set up a range of clothing for dogs called Meow and Barclay, along with her friend Tracy Griffith in April 2007. This was inspired by owning Vegas and another dog that she got in 2006, named Star. In an interview with the Advertiser newspaper, she expressed hope for Meow and Barclay, stating that she had struggled to get modelling jobs and that being part of Meow and Barclay is really empowering. I feel that I am calling the shots and in charge of my own life again. However, not all was great for Leslie. In July 2007, she broke up with Sutton. She was the one that initiated the breakup and moved out of their Rose Bay home, telling the Sunday Telegraph, "Scott Sutton and I have separated amicably and with only the best wishes and intentions for each other. I could never have endured what I went through in Bali without the support and love of Scott and his parents. Together we have been through an experience which has created a lifelong bond between us. I know more than many that life is never straightforward and can be at times incredibly painful. My decision was not easy and has filled me with sadness." But the heartache wasn't that long lasting, and in August 2007 she started dating magazine publisher and marketing executive Adam Zammit, describing Zammit as the man who helped mend her life to the Sunday Telegraph, with the pair marrying in Stonebridge Estate in Queenstown in New Zealand on the 28th of October 2012. Zammit would state that he was married to the girl of his dreams. Merrick Watts, best known as half of Nova 96.9's Merrick and Rosso radio duo, emceed the wedding. However, the honeymoon for the pair didn't last all that long, and in September 2014 they divorced. Moreover, Leslie was out of Meow and Barclay, which still exists, albeit without Leslie, and between 2007 and 2008 she attended the Sydney Design School before becoming an interior designer under Michelle Leslie's studio based in Stanmore in Sydney, which she founded in 2008. While she hasn't had all that many mega projects, some of her most notable projects have included the private members suite at Randwick Racecourse. See, told you she hasn't had that many big projects. In October 2016, she met singer Daniel Jones, best known as the frontman, guitarist and main songwriter of Silverchair, through a mutual friend. There was embarrassment for the pair as she was detained at Los Angeles International Airport in California in the United States of America on the 30th of July 2017 when she arrived aboard a Virgin Australia Boeing 777 from Sydney following difficulties utilising an automated passport kiosk, leading to her once again being in the headlines. While it was reported that the duo would get married by January 2019, and the Daily Mail Australia reporting that they would be getting married soon after Leslie was seen wearing an engagement ring on her wedding finger, the couple would split later in 2019. In September 2023, Michelle Leslie would announce to the Daily Telegraph that she was pregnant. Just 1 month earlier, her father, Albert Leslie, was inducted into the Basketball South Australia Hall of Fame. However, Leslie hasn't exactly found her place in Australian society, and indeed may never find a true sense of belonging or something to replace the albeit brief success that she found in modelling as a career. Indeed, in 2018, she would tell the Daily Telegraph that everyone in Australia had judged her. Since her release from Karabakan prison, Michelle Leslie has never been seen in a hijab or burqa. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate that this was a long-ass video, but I do hope that you enjoyed learning more about this controversial side note of Australian crime and Australians imprisoned overseas, and that this went beyond the 60 minutes interview with Leslie, as there's limited content on YouTube regarding Michelle Leslie and very few podcasts. Please do yourself a favour and hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of when new videos come out. Also, why not hit that like button and leave a nice comment? It helps more than you know, and your support is truly appreciated. Until next time, stay awesome, stay classy, be kind to everyone you meet, have an amazing day, and remember the truth is always more interesting than fiction.